What if I told you someone can slowly change the way you think without ever telling you what to think? Here's something most people never realize. The most dangerous manipulator isn't the loudest person in the room. Hindi rin siya yung mukhang masama. Most of the time, siya pa ang taong pinaka-comfortable kang kasama. The one who always listens. The one who always understands you. The one who makes you feel, finally, someone gets me. And that's exactly why manipulation is so dangerous. Because the first stage of manipulation never feels like manipulation. It feels like trust. When you hear the word manipulation, ano agad pumapasok sa isip mo? A scammer? A narcissist? A toxic relationship? Maybe someone who's controlling? Or someone who's always lying? Pero what if we've been looking at manipulation the wrong way this whole time? Because real manipulation doesn't begin when someone controls your actions. It begins when someone slowly influences the way you see reality. And once your perspective changes, your decisions start changing on their own. Hindi ka na kailangang pilitin. Hindi ka na kailangang takutin. Eventually, ikaw na mismo ang gagawa ng choices na gusto nilang gawin mo. At ang pinaka-scary na part, you genuinely believe it was your own decision. Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked back at a relationship, a friendship, or even a job at napaisip ka, bakit ko ba tinanggap yon? At that time, it felt right. It even made sense. Pero months later, or maybe years later, dun mo lang nakita ang mga red flags na dati hindi mo napapansin. The question is, what changed? Did reality suddenly change? Or did your perspective finally become clear? Most people believe manipulation only works on people who are weak. I don't think that's true. In fact, some of the smartest people in the world have been manipulated. Doctors, lawyers, business owners, psychologists, even intelligence agencies study manipulation because they understand one thing. Being intelligent doesn't make you immune to influence. Because manipulation doesn't attack your intelligence first. It quietly bypasses it and speaks directly to your emotions. Think about it. Kung gusto kitang kontrolin at sabihin ko agad, makinig ka sa akin. Anong gagawin mo? You'll probably resist. You'll question me. You'll protect your independence. But what if I never tell you what to do? What if I simply make you feel that I'm the only person who truly understands you? What if, little by little, I become the person you trust the most? Now your guard is down. And once trust is established, influence becomes effortless. So before we continue, I don't want you to think about your ex, your boss, your parents, or your friends. I want you to think about yourself. Because the question isn't, have I ever met a manipulator? The better question is, how many of my decisions were completely mine? And how many were quietly influenced by someone else? So here's the real question. How does a manipulator gain control without ever asking for it? The answer is, they don't chase control. They earn permission first. And that's exactly why manipulation is so difficult to recognize. Because nobody starts a relationship, a friendship, or a partnership by trying to control someone. They start by becoming someone you trust. Here's one thing. Every manipulator understands. People don't trust you because you're always right. They trust you because you make them feel understood. Think about that. Dalawang tao, parehong nagbibigay ng advice. Pareho ring may magandang intention. Pero sino ang mas pakikinggan mo? Usually, hindi yung may pinakamagandang explanation, kundi yung taong pinaparamdam sa'yo na naintindihan ka niya. Because once someone becomes your safest place, their opinion slowly becomes your reality. That's why manipulation rarely starts with pressure. It starts with connection. The manipulator listens, agrees with you, makes you feel seen, makes you feel important, not because they necessarily care, but because trust is easier to build than control. And once trust is built, influence becomes much easier. Here's something interesting. Imagine a complete stranger tells you, I think you're making a mistake. You'll probably ignore them. Now imagine, your best friend, your partner, or someone you deeply admire says the exact same sentence. Nothing changed. Same words, same message. The only thing that changed was who said it. That's influence. And influence is where manipulation quietly begins. The scary part is, most manipulators don't need to convince you every single day. Eventually, your own mind starts repeating their voice. Not because they forced you, but because you've already accepted them as someone worth believing. So maybe the first sign of manipulation isn't that someone is controlling your life. Maybe it's when you slowly stop questioning the person you trust the most. So, if manipulation doesn't begin with lies and it doesn't begin with control, where does it actually begin? I think it begins the moment someone slowly becomes the voice inside your head. Not because they force you, not because they threaten you, but because you've repeated their words so many times that they eventually sound like your own. Think about that. How many opinions do you have today that are truly yours? And how many were quietly borrowed from someone you trusted? A parent, a partner, a mentor, a friend, a celebrity, a content creator, even me. Because the truth is, every one of us influences someone. The question is, are we influencing people toward freedom or toward dependence? Here's the biggest mistake people make about manipulation. They think the goal is to control your life. It isn't. The real goal is much smaller. To influence one decision, then another, until one day you wake up living a life you never consciously chose. That's why the most dangerous manipulation doesn't steal your freedom overnight. It steals it, one decision at a time. So, how do you protect yourself? I don't think the answer is becoming paranoid. And I don't think the answer is trusting no one. Because that's impossible. The real protection is learning to pause before you agree, before you defend an opinion, before you change who you are for someone else's approval. Ask yourself one simple question. Would I still believe this if this person wasn't the one saying it? That's a difficult question because sometimes we're not attached to the idea, we're attached to the person. And once that happens, objectivity slowly disappears. And maybe that's why the strongest form of freedom isn't physical, it's psychological. It's the ability to think clearly even when your emotions are pulling you somewhere else. Because manipulation doesn't always begin with a manipulator. Sometimes it begins the moment we stop questioning our own certainty. At the beginning of this documentary, I asked you one question. How can intelligent people be manipulated without realizing it? Maybe now, the answer is clearer. It isn't because they're not intelligent, it's because they're human. And every human being wants to be understood, wants to belong, wants to be accepted. There's nothing wrong with that. The danger begins when our need for connection becomes stronger than our willingness to question. Because manipulation doesn't always change. What you do, sometimes it changes. Who you slowly become. If today's documentary changed the way you look at influence next week, we're going one level deeper. Because manipulation doesn't usually begin with fear. Sometimes it begins with affection. Sometimes with attention. Sometimes with someone who makes you feel like you're the most important person in the world. And that's exactly where we'll begin in our next documentary, The Psychology of Love Bombing. If this documentary gave you a new perspective, follow AI-Richie on our social media through the links in the description below. Every week, we explore the psychology of human behavior, manipulation, history, artificial intelligence, finance, and the hidden systems of influence that shape our lives and the world around us. I'll see you in the next episode.